Hello, darlings. This is Spies and Ties, a series of World War II in real time. I'm Astrid Deinhard.
And I'm Timothy Peach.
My good friend Timothy here is joining me as we go to the Vatican for our special series about the Catholic Church role in World War II espionage.
It's October 1939. Pope Pius XII walks through the gardens of his summer house in Castel Gandolfo. Usually his time here is a chance for some peace away from the Vatican.
But now his thoughts are on war. He has a fateful decision to make, one that will weigh on his conscience for the rest of his life.
Should he, as God's representative on earth, help to kill Adolf Hitler?
Et Spiritus Sanctus.
Thou shalt not kill. That's pretty much at the core of Christianity. But now Pope Pius XII is deeply involved in the conspiracy to assassinate Adolf Hitler. How on earth did we get here? Shouldn't the Pope be finding a peaceful solution based on the scriptures?
Well, he's already given peace a chance, hasn't he?
Actually, he has. Before he became Pope, back in July 1933, he was the Vatican's signatory to the Reichskonkordat. We talked about that in our previous episode on the Vatican's geopolitics. Back then, he was the Cardinal Secretary of State, the Vatican's foreign minister, and he still had his origin name, Eugenio Maria Giuseppe Pacelli. Lovely name.
Yes.
He knew Germany and the Nazis well. Between 17 and 29, he had been the papal nuncio in Germany, basically the Vatican's ambassador. So, he doesn't trust Hitler to stick to the Concordat, but he hopes he can hold the Nazis accountable for any breaches. The trouble is, Pacelli is far away in Rome.
So it is that in 1933, Pius begins spying on the German Reich. He needed someone in Germany to collect the evidence. Pacelli contracted this job out to the Munich Cardinal Michael von Faulhaber. Faulhaber has the perfect candidate. One of his old friends, meet Joey Ox.
Joe is one of those larger-than-life characters. His real name isn't Joey Ox, of course. It's Josef Müller. But he earned his nickname because he worked as an ox cart driver during his school days.
He's a committed Catholic, and when the Nazis took power, he was a lawyer. He defended all sorts of people that the Nazis hated, like members of banned labor unions and Jews who wanted to flee the country after the November 9th, 1938 pogrom that the Nazis call Reichskristallnacht.
That earned him a personal interrogation with Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler, which he managed to wriggle out of. He brushed off the Reichsführer SS like it was nothing.
Joey has lived a colorful life. He served in the army during the Great War, and before the Nazis outlawed democracy, he was in the Bavarian People's Party.
So, information flows in from all sorts of channels. He has contacts to the Munich Jesuits, pals from his old army days, and members of the underground anti-Nazi networks. With the help of a lot of beer, Joey even makes friends with Hans Rattenhuber, commander of Hitler's Reich Security Service RSD bodyguard, part of the SS.
The challenge is to get all of this material to the Vatican. Under the Concordat, the Vatican is guaranteed freedom of communication with all its bishops in Germany. But in reality, the SS opens mail and taps phones.
They need someone who knows how to invade Himmler's goons. I wonder who that could be.
Joey Ox to the rescue once again. He flies a tiny single-seater plane from Bavaria to Merano in northern Italy, with the documents stuffed into a briefcase hidden away in the cockpit. From there, a Vatican contact takes them down to Pacelli. Over the next 3.5 years, Pacelli dispatches over 70 diplomatic notes to the German ambassador in the Vatican complaining of breaches of the Concordat. All his concerns are ignored.
His efforts to maintain peace looks like they have failed. So, Pacelli will be the man to lead the Church to war.
Pope Pius XI dies in February 1939. In the conclave to elect his successor, Pacelli's diplomatic experience, especially his time spent in Germany, is the deciding factor. He's inaugurated on March 12, 1939, and chooses the papal name Pius XII in honor of his predecessor.
His inauguration is on the very same day that Hitler issues orders for the occupation of Czechoslovakia. It's here that we encounter what you might call the Vatican's intelligence network. I can hear you already reaching for your copies of the Da Vinci Code.
But hold on a second. The Vatican doesn't even have a professional spy agency. I mean, this is a state of less than 1,000 people. How would they even staff such a thing?
Well, what they do have is a diplomatic service. They have 37 papal nuncios around the world. These are men who are officially recognized by a host country as representing the Vatican City itself. Remember, Pius XII was himself a nuncio in Germany. There are also 22 apostolic delegates, which is a lower rank of diplomat.
Western and Central Europe are pretty well covered. There are nuncios in Germany, France, Poland, and Hungary at the outbreak of war. There are papal delegates in Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States. But the Vatican isn't allowed into the Soviet Union.
So, the Vatican has a stream of information flowing back to Rome. Most of this isn't exactly groundbreaking stuff. When the German army enters Prague in March, the Vatican receives a diplomatic cable with information that 487 Czech and Slovak Jesuits have been arrested and sent to prison camps. The information coming out of Czechoslovakia and soon to be coming from Poland confirms the Pope's worst fears. Hitler is now waging a war against Catholicism.
So the Pope is up to date with Hitler's horrors. But how does he start getting involved with the German resistance?
Well, it all begins with our old friend Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, chief of the German Military Intelligence Service, the Abwehr. He's at the center of the conservative resistance to Hitler, and we've got a whole video on him if you like to learn about his backstory. It's very good.
He's kept a record of the meetings earlier in the year at which Hitler ordered these measures. He hopes that if he presents this to the Western powers, along with a promise to remove Hitler from power, he can secure conditions for peace. He tried to take this evidence to the Americans in August. They rejected it on the ground of their neutrality. Now, he wants to try the British. He believes that the Vatican would be a perfect intermediary. Canaris isn't a Catholic, but he's got a misty-eyed belief in the inherent righteousness of the Church. He's also on good terms with the Pope from time spent together back in the 20s.
Wait, Canaris wants the leader of the world's Catholics to use his influence on the British?
That's it.
Didn't Henry VIII have something to say about that?
Yes, well, desperate times call for desperate measures, I suppose.
I suppose.
But Canaris can't exactly take a few days off and fly to the Vatican to meet his old friend. That would look a bit suspicious. And he'd probably get a knock on the door from Reinhard Heydrich, the head of the SS Sicherheitsdienst, the Nazi Party intelligence. He needs a go-between, someone with links to the Vatican who has experience carrying secret documents undetected. And who else would it be than our man for all season, Mr. Joey Ox. Canaris deputy Hans Oster recruits Joey through another Abwehr officer named Wilhelm Schmidhuber.
Wilhelm Schmidhuber. Remember that name. It'll be important, darlings. Very important.
After 3 hours of discussion, Joey agrees to take part. They shake hands and take a solemn vow. Either Hitler will die or they will. Joey is sent off to the Vatican. He arrives in the first week of October. Joey hands over the evidence and explains Canaris' plot to Ludwig Kaas, the Pope's advisor for German affairs.
Now, in the gardens of Castel Gandolfo, Pius weighs up the decision. Catholic teaching states that tyrants can be killed if all peaceful options have been exhausted, and if the killing of the tyrant will improve conditions for those who are suffering. The Pope decides that the plot meets those conditions. By October 17th, Joe has his reply. Pius is in. It takes some time for contact to be made with the British, though. But at midnight on the morning of February 7th, 1940, British ambassador to the Vatican, Francis Darcy Godolphin Osborne, is spirited into the Pope's office.
Francis Darcy Godolphin Osborne, I think he could win the war with the power of that name alone.
Yeah. Pius' meeting with the elegantly named ambassador is strictly off the record. Pius sits at his desk, reading from his notes in German. He informs Darcy of the plot. Darcy is skeptical. He fears that the whatever government replaces Hitler's might be just as tyrannical, but he's impressed by Pius' commitment. Is there any more effective lobbyist for your plot than the Pope? No? Huh? Darcy cables British Foreign Minister Lord Halifax, who's almost as tall as Spartacus, and that's pretty tall. After discussing the matter with British Prime Minister Richard Chamberlain...
That's the actor who played the Count of Monte Cristo. You probably mean Neidell.
Did I say Richard?
Yes, you said Richard.
Sorry for that. In fact, I do. Anyway, Halifax sends a response back from London on February 17th, right? Osborne is to get in touch with the Pope again and ask His Holiness to invite the German plotters to set out some concrete terms.
By March 1940, there's a communications link established between the German resistance and Britain. It works something like this. In Berlin, Oster submits questions to Müller. Müller carries them over to the Vatican to an intermediary who gives them to Pius. Pius then passes the information to Osborne, who cables it securely to London. To get the answers back to Berlin, the same system works in reverse. London to Osborne, Osborne to Pius, Pius to Müller, Müller to Oster. Got it?
I'm exhausted just thinking about that.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
London's final terms come through on about March 10th or 11th. Hitler must be removed. Poland should be liberated. Rule of law should be re-established in Germany. Other occupied territories are to self-determine their future by referendum. In return, an armistice will be brokered through the Pope and Germany can keep Austria.
Well, that's nice, right?
Isn't
Keep
it?
Austria. Right. Müller carries a copy back to the Abwehr's headquarters on March the 14th. Now, Canaris and Oster have to convince the big beasts of the Wehrmacht to join the plot. Men like Chief of the General Staff Franz Halder and Supreme Commander of the Army Walter von Brauchitsch.
Halder is open to the plot, and von Brauchitsch decides to consider the possibility. But they soon get cold feet. Halder will tell everyone after the war that he couldn't strike Hitler down after the Führer's triumphs in Norway in April and France in June. He'll say that the people would see him as a traitor rather than a hero.
Well, that's not quite true. Actually, Halder and co. have stuffed themselves fat with Hitler's bribe money.
Sure, certainly.
It always works.
It's the same,
you know.
isn't it? On top of that, the new British Prime Minister Winston Churchill turns away from the whole thing. From London, it looks like the German resistance are pretty useless. Instead of getting on with removing Hitler, they've allowed him to conquer half of Europe.
It's left to the German Catholics to pick up the pieces. Pius has a nuncio in Berlin, but he considers him to be soft on Nazism. He even suspects that the nuncio's deputy may be an SS spy. So he needs to bypass this potential risk.
Again, Joey Ox lends a hand. Remember how he'd been collecting evidence of the Reich's breaches of the Concordat back in the 30s? Well, much of his information came from the Catholic religious orders, such as the Jesuits, the Benedictines, and Dominicans.
The important thing about these religious orders is that they're loyal to their leaders in Rome, not to the local bishop or the nuncio. Still, Pius has to be frightfully careful. He believes that the Benedictines are open to cooperation with the Nazis.
But the Jesuits and the Dominicans have been declared enemies of the Reich and are ready to fight. In May 1941, in a closed-door conference in Berlin, the Jesuit and Dominican leadership formed themselves into a 7-man group called the Orders Committee. Father Augustin Rösch of the Jesuits takes the lead. The committee declares their will to endure and preserve our Catholic honor before our consciences, before the people, before history, the Church, and the Lord God.
Joey handles their communications with Rome. On September 30th of 41, Pius gives the Order Committee permission to get involved with the military resistance.
Just as the Pope gives them permission, 2 main strands of resistance are coming together. The first is under the charge of an Abwehr officer named Helmut James von Moltke. Shocked by the violations perpetrated by the German forces in occupied France, he resolved to work for regime change and found a fellow traveller in his Abwehr colleague Hans von Donani. Since November 1940, he has been building up the Kreisau Circle, the center of the German intellectual resistance to Nazism.
They're linked with an officer at the Eastern Front, and this is Generalmajor Henning von Treschow. He is disgusted by the provisions at the Commissar Order, which declare that all Soviet political officers are to be executed without question. In September 1941, he sends a messenger to Oster detailing his intentions to kill Hitler.
Canaris is worried that simply removing Hitler will plunge the country into civil war. Treschow agrees. The 2 men believe that military, civilian, and religious centers need to be fused to ensure the stability of Germany after the coup.
Moltke's view on Catholicism are a bit like those of Admiral Canaris. He's a Protestant, but he believes that the Protestant bishops are too comfortable with the regime. He sees the Catholic Church as having a greater potential for resistance against Hitler.
Right. So in September 1941, he has dinner with General Ludwig Beck, and they decide to proceed along Catholic lines.
In October, the connection is made. Father Rösch takes a trip to Abwehr headquarters. His cover story is that he's there to discuss the status of military chaplains. In reality, he's there to forge a link with the Kreisau Circle.
He's met by a Catholic friend in the Abwehr who gives him a complex set of instructions to find the meeting point.
He picks his way across gardens, through a garage, up a stairway, and into a hidden flat above the garage.
He finds a doorway, rings the bell, and gives a password. He's greeted by Moltke.
Over coffee and apple pancakes, the two forge the link between the military and the Catholic Church.
By December 1941, Joey, Moltke, and the Jesuits are meeting every few days. Joey Ox keeps the Pope updated with their progress.
From February 9th, 42, he spends 2 weeks in Rome. He briefs Pius on the activities of the Kreisau Circle and the Tresco plot. The Pope agrees that the plotter would be morally justified in blowing up Hitler's plane.
Pius also agrees to assist the new Germany that will rise from the coup. Pius will recognize the new government, and Joey will be the new German ambassador to the Vatican. Joey would then engage Pius in seeking a peace deal with the Western allies.
On March 12th, it's the 4th anniversary of Pius' inauguration. He holds a celebration in the Sixtine Chapel. It must be a strange affair. With the Vatican, an island of neutrality, there are diplomats from Britain, the United States, and Italy there. The British ambassador Osborne and his American counterpart Taylor exchange knowing smiles, Both have conceived notice from Monsieur Kars and from Müller that Tresco's plot is underway.
Joey spends March 13th in a pub near Abwehr headquarters in Berlin. He's waiting for the code word that Hitler has been killed. Canaris' plane stands ready at Tempelhof Airport to fly him off to Rome. Of course. As we know, that code word never comes. Hitler's plane flies too high and Trescow's bomb fails.
No matter, Joey and his Jesuit friends have a backup plan. Hitler is building a new bunker, codenamed Siegfried, in the suburb of Pullach, just 10 miles south of Munich. It's slap bang next door to the Munich Jesuit Berchmannskolleg, their seminary. Hitler spent 3 days there in November last year, and the Orders Committee decide to kill him the next time he turns up.
The plan is to disguise themselves as members of the organization Todt, gain access to the facility and plant a time bomb. They've already managed to get hold of a set of blueprints. And remember how we told you that Joey Ox was friends with Hitler's RSD bodyguard Rattenhuber? Well, Rattenhuber has let slip details of the guard procedures.
Listen, right now, 4th of April 1943, Hitler's train is on the way to Munich. The Orders Committee are ready. Joey Ox is ready. But before they can spring into action, the SS strike. What will happen to our dear old Ox? Well, you'll have to wait until our next video to find out.
You won't want to miss that.
No, you don't want to miss that to get more exciting stories. like this, join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. We will see you next time, darlings.
Was a pleasure.